the fear is always there and the ups and downs will always be there as long as you're a business owner.
Today I'm talking with Stevi Gable Carr, founder of the Wise Wellness Guild, who spent years as a senior leader at P&G, Dual Rubbermaid, and UC Health before deciding her real work was building bridges between corporations seeking to drive change and the women in minority-owned wellness businesses doing the actual work. Hi, Stevi Carr. Thank you so much for being here with me today on Behind the Numbers. I'm excited to have you join us and talk a little bit about what working with you as one of your clients might be like. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came to start Wise Wellness Guild?
Yeah, my background, I was at Procter Gamble for a little over a decade, working in larger CPG on global businesses, and just fascinating to really get into the hearts and minds of consumers all across the world. But felt really called to really deepen my experience in the wellness market. Hopped into healthcare for a couple of years, working with the health system, UC Health, where I was leading all of their brand marketing and creative services and really trying to establish them as the leader in academic medicine in the region. For me, my why, I'm all about catalyzing human potential and felt like that there was a real gap between wellness and sickness, and that there weren't really a lot of people trying to, one, create an ecosystem of wellness in cities, and that there wasn't really anybody who kind of owned wellness. They own parts and pieces of it, but it's so big. And that was almost 10 years ago at this point. But also, I felt like that there was a lot of, I don't want to say bad actors, but people who maybe were positioning themselves as wellness experts and maybe were not doing things that I felt like were really ethical in a lot of different ways. And so left to start my own company in 2019 and really help to support a lot of different industries and verticals. We do a lot of work with healthcare in the healthcare space, healthcare providers, still work a lot in CPG and banking, and really try to help companies and organizations with their positioning, both internal with how they're supporting employee health and wellness, and then external with their branding. And we do that through campaigns and end-to-end strategies as well as experiential.
Awesome. I love that. So in terms of daily operations, what do you see that's working really well right now for your clients? And then what are some situations that maybe you're currently navigating with clients to help them keep things running smoothly?
Yeah, I think that what's working well is my clients are embracing things like AI, and they're really kind of getting into spaces that are helping employees help themselves, in the sense that allowing for them to find faster ways of doing work that maybe not wouldn't be as fulfilling, and or giving them new perspective on work that maybe they would have done differently because of bias of previous managers or things like that. And that's both internal and external. I also think that if I were to say there are opportunity areas, a lot of people have really, and I saw this in COVID as well, is that because of some of the political landscape, and because of maybe a lot of uncertainty with some decisions that have been made with tariffs and some of the just challenges, that they've really pushed pause on a lot of programs that are related to employee health and wellness, spending with consultants and bringing them in for like an external kind of new view on things. And by taking a lot of these things in-house, and then by giving people extra work that they're not compensated for, it's actually been a landslide backwards. We're losing a lot of people to burnout. We're losing a lot of people who just simply aren't like achieving their KPIs at work because they just have so much extra work. And that for me is just frustrating and sad, but I always see things like that as a huge opportunity.
Yeah, that is an opportunity, right? Like digging in, getting curious. That's a big value that we have at Fit for Profit, is like getting curious into why isn't somebody hitting their KPIs? Like, well, if we've given them a lot of extra stuff, it makes it really hard to focus on, and then
Ah,
helping them understand like what's important for their role too.
Tony Hsieh, I always looked up to him so much. He was the founder of Zappos and has since passed, but he really changed the whole way I look at the integration of culture and brand as it relates to the way that you connect with consumers. And to paraphrase, he said, your people are your culture is your brand. And I feel like that in end-to-end approach of like, if you have healthy people who do the right work in health and wellness and are really reaching people, nobody knows your consumer better than the people working for you. And I felt like I was fortunate to grow up in a landscape where P&G had things a million years ago, like Blueprint for Healthy Living, which was more than just a 2-day workshop. I mean, it was really institutional, foundational things to help you thrive as a leader. And I've never had to do a return to work or whatever. I never knew about going to work every day. Like it's so embedded in who they are. There's
Yeah.
a lot of policies. I was the first adoptive mother that got 4 months of maternity leave, when that was
Mm,
just so meaningful. So all the things like that that you look at where you say, this is archaic, this happened in 2013. It seems like forever ago. We're
mhm.
still battling some of those things again now. I feel like we have a real opportunity to kind of reset ourselves and say, what is the purpose of we make our money if not to help to support like the catalyst of that human potential? And so that's kind of what gets me out of bed every morning, Shannon.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love you have the background of big companies, P&G,
Yeah.
and then I'm curious what that feels like then working with a small business. I really wanted to dig into that with you on the side, which we'll get to. Also on the operations side and like leading with your values, because I feel like as a small business owner, that is one of the most freeing things to me. Like I get to do that, and
Yeah.
I view that as both an opportunity and an obligation or a responsibility,
Sure.
small business owner. So I'm
Yeah.
curious your take on that side of it too.
That is such a great question. And I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. So I really appreciate it,
Mm,
because when I get to times where I have to say no to clients that I would love to work with, but I can tell we're not ethically aligned, those times become really hard because you don't want to say no to business. You don't want to turn people away. But I think that one of the privileges that I had with working at P&G is our purpose, values, principles, our PVPs, were on the back of our badges. It was the first thing that you learned about. They hired based on how aligned you were with your Enneagram and your motivators and knowing how ethical of a person you really are. So for me, it's become very natural to kind of move into that space. What I have found is that sometimes when I look at my personal set of values and I look at my company values, they're oftentimes one and the same. Sometimes where I find myself really challenged is wanting to grow and scale in a way that a lot of other maybe founders value speed and they don't necessarily value transparency. And that's always been kind of my fear. And it's driven me to be a little more vulnerable. You want to be polished and buttoned up and be a certain way and portray confidence. But the reality of it is, who I am as a person is incredibly vulnerable, and I lead with love, and I want to do the right thing for humans first. And that's the only reason why I show up to work is to improve the world. And I don't want to do it in a way that's not in service of capitalism, because I think capitalism actually does a lot of really good things for the world. I think that there's a lot of really good perks that we a lot of times don't give enough credit to, of what money can actually do to create jobs, to drive ecosystems, to drive innovation. And so it's about, how do you align being ethical and doing the right thing, being vulnerable enough to say I need help and where this is going, and also being able to do that in a way where people still trust you. And so that's a
yeah,
really delicate balance, I think, all the time with both clients. And then also, we work a lot of times with other small businesses, other small business clients, to connect them to large businesses. And a lot of times it's about also carrying their equity too. And maybe they sometimes also want to grow at a larger speed. And like, how do you really help them succeed in some of those environments?
for sure. One of the themes I've been noticing in conversations like this recently is a lot around sustainability and making sure that, yes, we want to grow and scale at speed, like you were saying, but how sustainable is that? And
Yeah.
what are we giving up if we do it at speed? And I think that speaks to the whole ethical conversation that you're talking about. And I haven't met anybody in the wellness industry who isn't in it for the people they're serving, right? This is not the industry
Yeah.
you pick if you're in it for any other reason than the people you're serving. And so
Yes,
you're right, keeping all of those things kind of in mind when we're making decisions in our business.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
so let's kind of turn the tide a little bit towards finances and really get into what are some of the biggest financial bright spots that you're seeing or witnessing with yourself or your clients? And then what are those growth edges that you're navigating as well?
Yeah. As a part of one of our extensions to Wise Wellness Guild, we started a couple of years ago with building a new business, a sister business called WellNext. And that has opened up the doors to a space and experiential that we previously did not have before. We really do believe that in-person connection will help to close the trust gap that exists in the almost $10 trillion wellness industry that maybe has been eroded by a lot of trial and error, a lot of people. I'm not going to say people in the wellness industry that might be producing things that aren't exactly really moving the needle. But, and I don't want to say it's not predatory, but I've come across a decent amount of people that call themselves doctors that in fact are not physicians. They do not have a medical license, and they, in fact, they're not a physical therapist or a chiropractor. And so that for me, like closing that trust gap, I think that doing that alone on a digital platform is very, very tricky to do. And so by us, we create a Well Next where we create end-to-end experience where it's about creating experiences for people to meet with like-minded individuals, common values, connect with wellness as the foundation, but also to be able to connect with brands that have those same sense of alignment. So we aim to close that trust gap in wellness and want to do that through also providing the right access to the right ambassadors, influencers, content creators, and key opinion leaders in markets. And then also create a pipeline of content that goes around all year. So it's not just about a one-way discussion, but also having conversations with each other about what other people are seeing and contributing to the vetting conversation. What I would say is that was birthed out of the fact that I felt when I was purely servicing not just communities, because so much of Wise is about like brands, but what so much about what servicing Wise is about servicing companies and brands, which we still do at Well Next. I think that by replacing the community at the heart of everything really allowed for us to make this more of a consumer charged, like it's what Gen Z is demanding. And it's about really understanding, getting back to the core of the human insight that maybe with Wise, we lost a little bit of momentum on because we're really trying to help to support brands that are already kind of down. They already have established ecosystems in the wellness space, but what they really need is a complete ground up rebuild. And because what they're built, I'll give you an example without any actual brand names, but at a time I was asked to help reposition a shampoo brand that was in fact full of chemicals and not made of things that were healthy for you, but they did smell inspired by natural smells. And I was asked to reposition that brand and find a way to make it appear as though it was clean, organic, free of all of these pieces. And I said, you can't, what we're talking about is either a line extension or a complete brand restage, but we're not talking about like an incremental thing here. And those are very expensive and costly. And you're in a very saturated market where you might have getting even 5% of market share is incredible. And so I think all of that to say, we're in a really interesting time where the market will now demand that people do the right thing and that they do what they say they're going to do, because I think the public is tired of being lied to. But the positive part about that is I really do believe that the control is in our hands and we have the ability to kind of guide the conversation in a way like we've never been able to before of what we're willing to buy and putting our money where our mouth is.
Yeah, it's really fun. I feel like to see the consumer really have a voice and really speak up and demand things, and brands that listen and go that way. And then what happens to brands who don't listen, right?
Right. I'd love to pose this back to you. What is really interesting for me coming from a big multi-billion-dollar ecosystem is like I love this kind of challenger brand, like small founder-led experience that is, I think, driving a lot of innovation. And in fact, like you're seeing acquisitions happen of these, but in a lot of ways, the consumer doesn't want them to be acquired because they know the bigger company might ruin it, or that bigger company doesn't represent their values. And then that's a whole other thing. So I'd love to know, Shannon, like, are you seeing some of that too? Because it's always like that. I think that that dynamic is really going to come to a head here soon.
Yeah, I do think that that dynamic is going to come to a head. I think we see where VC and disruption has benefited us, and we're excited for it, and we're really questioning now what are the values that are behind those acquisitions. And yeah, you do lose. Like I said, it's good. Like some of the disruption that has happened is good and was necessary. And it's possible to do that with really good values at the same time. And we've seen small brands do that, and we're not
seeing that from VCs. It's not as transparent from
Yeah.
VCs. And so, yeah, there is some pushback
And I think
around
that
that.
there's another layer to that too that I saw, like it's over 90% of private equity brands are putting in when they're looking at acquisitions, they're asking a question around like team mental health. And so they
Mm,
are interestingly saying like how sustainable are you as a team? Like if we're investing in this team, right? And so I think that even as I'm looking at this other business, like we're looking at, I've always bootstrapped my own business, okay? And that's always been a great thing for me. Now I'm looking to grow and scale in a way, and I'm vetting my own ways that I'm looking at angel investors and looking at how to raise capital. And I think ultimately, like that's something I'm asking a lot of questions about to say, can you come in and help support me in a way where we can grow together, but in a way that you're not going to ask me to do something different? And I think that with my values, you're not going to ask me to
yeah.
challenge my own values. And that just in the experience of like helping to support brands and then also with on my own, I think it's going to be a conversation that's going to, like I said, be at the forefront of a lot of people's minds in this industry.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also interesting to see we've all been hearing and I've been preaching, I feel like hire for values, right? And you talked about that's how P&G hired. It was for values. And like that's what we do and that's what we encourage clients to do. And now we're really talking about being hired for our values, right? Or
Yes.
selling for our values. So
Yeah.
as the small business owner, it goes both ways. It's who we want to work with and then who we want to work with on the other side as far as
Yeah.
the buy sell agreement.
Yeah,
That's really
and a part of my work, I went back 3 years ago and got my coaching certification, like executive coaching from Case Western Reserve University. And I did that because I felt like I was working with clients that they were trying to promote wellness so much, but they themselves were so overworked and they really didn't understand who they were. And they were going through the motions of innovation when their work plugging it into AI, getting concepts back, spitting out, and then it's flopping with the consumer. And you're like, why? Well, you don't have any capacity to pour into really understanding another human. And so if you look back at the concept of Maslow's hierarchy, like when people can't ascend into those higher levels and they're just in that safety security space, they're like worried about job security. They're worried about getting their kid, how we started this conversation today, like getting their kid off to a million different places and caring for aging parents and they themselves. I'm a 2 times cancer survivor, right? I have my
Mm,
own health stuff. And so you think about like we get into our echo chamber when we're diluted with so much stuff, we can't ever get into worrying about other people love and belonging. And I think that that's part of that trust gap is because we've lost sight of that real insight, that real understanding of who we're serving, that if we can close that and show up for our consumers in a way that means I've made the time to meet with you in real life. And out of the millions of consumers that I serve right now, you matter to me. And let's talk about
yeah.
what you need and let's use those opportunities. I think that that's where the small business advantage is helpful because they get those one-on-one opportunities so much more than people that are in big business. And so it's a real learning opportunity to not only you got into the company for a reason, and I hope that it wasn't just for a paycheck. I hope you thought about the company you were going to work for. I hope that mattered to you. But once you got into it, somewhere along the way, maybe you lost sight of like how you align with that, your values with the company values, and meeting with consumers in real life and being in the mix is such an incredible way to reconnect with the company. And it's amazing what I'm seeing. That shift into experiential just does so much more than you think it will. It's really, really cool thing to see. And so I'm excited where that's going. I just have to figure out now on Wise on my base business, like how I really reinvigorate back on the more of the insight side and how we really get back to the human again.
Yeah, I was just going to say for the really small local businesses. So, thinking about fitness studio owners or med spa owners, that type of thing. I'm seeing a big trend in person there. I mean, those are already
Yeah.
in person businesses, right?
Yeah.
But retreats and women's circles and places where we also, I think you mentioned while we were recording here about vulnerability, right? And that's just
Yeah.
who you are. And when we can bring that into our community as a micro business, if you will, that really solidifies a community in a way that is really hard for somebody else to come in and compete with. And
Yeah.
so that's really what I'm seeing people really start to take. I don't want to say take advantage of in like a bad way, but that's where you're building customer base
Well, I
right
think
now.
it's been the opportunity that was really devalued with the rise of social media and all of this focus on digital spend. And you realize that I call that feeding the alligators. Like they're always going to be hungry. I saw something really crazy that social media, it's like 0.03% engagement is where we're at. So think about, I don't know about you. I've been in the position for years where I spent hours on editing a reel and I wanted to get just right because words matter to me. I'm in front of a camera for an hour, flubbing over my words, and then I go to edit it. And that's a whole thing that I had to teach myself how to do because we wear multiple hats. And then we get into a position where we post it and we don't post it at the exact right time and we didn't put money behind it because we've already spent our own sunk cost on our own time. And then it gets five legs and you're like, it feels catastrophic. It feels terrible. And so you kind of get to a place where like, I think that most people, like you said, get into this because they love humans. If you get into wellness, it's because you see the value in helping improve somebody in their life. And so I think that to take your comment a step further of I think it's also about building relationships with people and collaborating. I'm going to use a bad phrase, but it's the only one I have right now, and borrowed equity of finding people who might help you to expand your network in a way that it's not the same. So I'm not talking about a yoga studio partnering with another yoga studio. That's not what I'm saying. Although I love that. And you guys should totally do that and have a nice long weekend retreat or something. I think it's more about finding a mental health professional and a nutritionist and a financial advisor and thinking about the person as a whole person, not just how they happen to spend with you and helping to provide a real value to them. Create either a time, money, or treasure. Like, how can you create real value for them to allow for that to create a bond between the two of you? And I think that when you are intentional about getting to know them and their habits and practices, those opportunities really reveal themselves to you in a much more meaningful way that allows for that experience to be joyful for you too. And it really kind of pours back into you as a business owner in a way that will hopefully help you make more money. Because I will also say I've made the bad mistake of doing all those things for free in the past, thinking that the ROI would be there. And I don't work for free anymore. That's my number one thing is founders don't eat last in this house anymore. So we've got to like really prioritize our own financial security and wellness before we start to do that. But you can do it in a way that's lucrative as long as your intentions are pure.
Yeah. So, Stevie, maybe you just answered my next question. I was going to ask, like, you've spent years as a senior leader at a big, large organization, and then you founded a small business. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that the financial reality is very different in those two different
Oh, yeah.
careers. So, what was the biggest money surprise when you made that leap? And then, is there something that you wish someone had told you about the financial side before you started your business?
I think that I am just an eternal optimist. And I kind of thought my business plan year one was going to be, it was so sound. It was really sound. And I vetted it with advisors and with trusted resources. And then COVID hit. And I was like, this is such a fun time to leave my full-time job and security and try to start a business where the whole purpose is people meeting in person. That's like really great. And so I know that that's not always going to be the case, but what I think it represents is that there are always surprises. And I think that if somebody had ever told me that P&G was used to building 10-year trajectories and then backing into a glide path, that had bumper rails on it. So you couldn't really wildly succeed at P&G, but you could never really fail. And that's a good thing for a company that has shareholders, that has people, thousands of employees that are relying on this innovation working, right? And so that was one really big surprise for me is that you can swing big, but you better be ready to fall really far and like hit it hard. And I like to take risk. And I had personally suffer from a bit of financial insecurity in the sense that I don't come from a lot of money. I grew up with a money under my mattress kind of family. So we didn't really understand the value of borrowing with the intent of growing and how to leverage your resources that are around you. So for me, the first 5 years of my career were spent as an entrepreneur about like, we build it and then it gets reinvested back into the business. And once it gets to the threshold, then I'll start paying myself. But by the time that I got there, I was so burnt out that I wasn't sure that at year 5 I was going to keep going. I was like, I'd scrolling LinkedIn as we do. I don't know about you. When I'm at my lowest, I'm like, man, who's like, who's got a good remote opportunity? And at my worst times, that's my worst habit, is I know where my mental space is when I'm like scrolling there. But the reality of it is the biggest thing for me is realizing that the ebbs and flows are very real. And anybody that I coach, with also people who are leaving corporate, which is quite a few people, like leaving corporate to go start their own businesses. In my executive coaching practice, I always say the fear is always there and the ups and downs will always be there as long as you're a business owner. And it's a matter of you being better at learning how to work with the fear and understanding its role
Yes.
in your life as a motivator versus as something that paralyzes you. And I think that you really should understand before you get into this, like what your relationship is with risk and fear and how you manage your own emotions in times. Because I'll be really honest. I mean, my base business wise, it's the worst year I've ever had last year. I'm getting a
Mm.
return, let's say that. And so that's crazy because I've been years where I've been closer to 2 million plus, right? But last year was a huge investment year. I took a big swing on PR. I took a big swing on investing. I launched a book, but we also had clients who made the decisions not to re-up because of business decisions, not because they were unhappy with us. But those things happen. Things are outside of our control. And so the resilience piece is the part that I would say having nothing to do with money. When I'm at my best and I'm most resilient, I can see clearly about my faith in the product and also how to solve for these ups and downs challenges and just get more creative. I think about being open to borrowing, doing a line of credit and having good partnerships along the way to do that, or to find an investor and say, do I really want another boss? Do I have to look at it that way? No. I kind of want a partner to help me grow this. And so, yeah, I don't know. Think that there's just a lot of lessons baked into all of that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of gems there for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what I love, Stevie, first of all, thank you so much for the vulnerability. Like, it's not always easy to share about where we come from with money, especially. We don't talk about it enough. And I just appreciate people who will share that. The one relationship that you didn't talk about specifically, like you didn't name it, that I am really aware of business owners needing to be aware of their own relationship with money. You
Yeah.
do have one. And Stevie, you kind of told us about yours, even though you didn't
Yeah.
mention complete honesty for me. It took me a long time in business to realize what my relationship with money. I'm sitting here as an accountant, y'all. I
Yeah.
work with money every single day. I had my own stuff around money that I needed to deal with. And so I'm just a big proponent. I think everybody in the world needs a mental health therapist, but maybe especially business owners, right? There's
I
just a
think
lot
so
of things
too.
that we go on our own.
Well, and I think, Shannon, like what I love about your philosophy and what you're kind of tying into is we all not only have a relationship with money, but we have a money story. And I have really crafted like, okay, this predates me, right? This is my family legacy from generations ago. What stories are embedded in our subconscious and in our DNA that have kind of taught us what that survival looks like? And if we can name it, I think it's a lot easier to navigate. Will it propel you forward or will it hold you back? And for me, what I realized when I started to dig into my money story, and we did a program actually on this for Wise Wellness Guild with Fifth Third Bank, their private management group. I think it was with Paycor, actually one of my clients. We did this for their employees, did a whole thing on how to dig in and navigate your personal money story. And then we did have a lot of people say, hey, I think I maybe need to do a deep dive on this. I might need to go in, and there are multiple resources. The therapist, as you mentioned, financial planner, that you don't have to see a financial planner that has a $2 million minimum. And I think that's one last thing I want to say to just to business owners is that there are a lot of people out there that are cash-based planners that are just like you and I. They want you to be successful, and that's why they get up and do the work every day. And they're able to help you, guide you, and just give you direction. And so I've had conversations like this a lot that I know financial security or insecurity directly impacts my mental health, but it also impacts my ability to do my job and my occupational wellness, whether I love my job or strongly struggle with my job sometimes. And that, luckily, that's fewer than it is the other. So I think it's just like understanding you're a whole person, and there's just like a very matrixed approach to like your philosophy on like dollars, I guess.
For sure. Absolutely. I really appreciate that insight today, Stevi. So if people want to find you, follow along, learn more about you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so I think my LinkedIn, Stevi Gable Carr, is probably the easiest way to find me. My business is wisewellnessguild.com. And if you want to check out our new experiential things that are happening in Miami, New Orleans, Orlando, and Houston, you can check us out at Wellnext. That's WELLNXT global.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stevi, for being here. It was great chat with you today, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Numbers. If today's conversation resonated with you, subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss a new episode every week. And if you're a health or wellness business owner who's ever wondered what's really going on behind your own numbers, I'd love to talk. Head to fitforprofit.com to learn more or book a complimentary clarity call. We'll see you next week.